Welcome back to Backspace Academy. In this hands-on lab on CloudFormation, we'll be using a pre-made CloudFormation template to launch a LAMP, which stands for Linux Apache MySQL PHP, a LAMP environment on EC2. Then we will delete the CloudFormation stack, which will delete all of the resources that were created by CloudFormation. First off, we need to jump into the CloudFormation console. So again, services, and we select CloudFormation from the Management Tools section. Okay, because we haven't created a stack before, we're going to have this welcome screen. I'm just going to run through very quickly some of these options here. So the first one there is to just create a stack, which is what we will be doing, and that will launch an environment in a single region. And then we've got a stack set. So this is a lot more advanced and we won't go into that. But what you can do is actually create a stack set, which will launch an environment in multiple regions. And it can also do that in multiple AWS accounts as well. We can design a template using the CloudFormation Designer. And if you're going on to the AWS Associate pathway through through Backspace Academy, then you will get a lot of work in using the CloudFormation Designer. Now that is a drag and drop graphical user interface where you can drag and drop items on, EC2 servers and all this sort of stuff, and link them using a graphical user interface. And that's really good because you can actually see your environment, how it all works, and visualize it, and then launch it directly from that graphical user interface. We can also create a template from our existing resources. So we've already launched an EC2 instance and we've done a bit of work. We can actually select those resources using a CloudFormation tool, and that will create a CloudFormation template for us. Again, we'll learn more about that in the pathway for the associate level. But for now, we are just going to be creating a stack in a single region. So we'll click on Create New Stack. So we're just going to select a sample template that has already been created by AWS. I'll select the single instance sample for a LAMP stack. Don't select the multi-AZ one because we don't want to create a multi-AZ. We want to keep costs low here. And what we can do is that before we launch all this, we can actually have a look at the template in CloudFormation Designer. Now, I'll just click on that, and that will launch this graphical user interface for CloudFormation Designer. And so you can see we've got our web server, which is our LAMP web server, and then we've got a security group for that as well. So we can click on these and it will show the actual part of the CloudFormation template that belongs to. So I'm just going to maximize this now, and you can see here we've got our web server security group, and it's allowing traffic on port 80, which is HTTP, which is what we want for a web server. And it's also allowing us to connect in on port 22 for SSH if we want to connect in directly to the Linux operating system. So I'll just minimize that again. And we can see here on the web server, we can click on that, and that will show our web server instance. And we can see here it's an EC2 instance, and it's got some stuff happening here. Don't worry too much about that. But you just need to know that is the resources for this CloudFormation stack, and the resources are the only part of a CloudFormation template that are required. So I'll just jump back out of that and go back into leave. So unfortunately, it's just put us back to where we started from. So I'll again create a new stack. We'll select it again. And what we'll do is we'll go on to next. We'll give this stack a name. That will be fine. We'll leave the database name as it is. We'll put in a password. So leave the password all just alphanumeric. Otherwise, it'll be a bit of a problem. And I'm just going to use admin for the user. We'll select a T2 micro because we want this to be on the free tier. And we should already have a key name because we've already used the EC2 service before. So we should have a key name already. We'll just select that one there and click on next. Okay, so we've got some options here. We can attach a tag. So I'm going to attach a name tag to this, and it has to be capital N, And then it'll come up in the list of EC2 instances when we create that instance. And we can see it's good to give your resources a name tag so you can find them easy enough. And I'm just going to give it the same name as the stack. Now, if we created an IAM role and this EC2 instance required an IAM role, we could attach that here or associate that here. We also have rollback triggers. So after a period of time, if the stack hasn't created correctly, then it will be rolled back to what it was previously. And so we can set that up if we like, but we'll just leave that empty and we'll click on next. And so there we can review that. There's no problems there, and we click on create. So what will happen is it will go through and it will start to create that security group, and then it will create that instance and launch that instance for us. So if we click on the refresh icon up here, we can see the status, and there we can see we've got a lot of stuff going on here. So it's already created that security group, and it's in the process of creating that instance. So it's going to take some time for that instance to launch. Okay, so now it has the status of create complete. So again, you just keep refreshing the screen here, and that should all be ready to go. So if we now go to the EC2 service, so again, go to services, we select EC2 from the compute services. We should be able to find this EC2 instance, and here we go. So we go to instances, and there we can see is our test. Don't worry about the ones that I did previously, but there we have our test CF that is up and running. So what we can do now is that we can select this public DNS, or we can select the public IP, either one, that is fine. And we just go to that in our browser and see what happens. And so there you go. So we've actually successfully launched a PHP or a LAMP stack, and here we have a PHP application that is running on that. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail with this CloudFormation stack. So I'm just going to go back to the CloudFormation management console. Okay, so in the management console, we've got a number of tabs here that we can have a look at. And so we're going to have a look at the template here. And that will be the CloudFormation template that we used to launch this stack. So we'll have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So we've obviously got a description here, but we've also got this section called parameters. Now, if you remember when we launched this stack, it asked us to enter a lot of things. So we had to select a key name for the EC2 instance. We had to enter in a database name, and the default there was my database, and a DB user and a DB password. So the parameters section is what we use to get information from the person that is launching that stack, and it will come up on the screen, on the user interface when you're going through and launching that stack. And then you can get that information and pass it on to CloudFormation to make sure that the right EC2 instance type is launched and all that sort of thing. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit further. And so you can see here we've got the default, we've got the EC2 instance type, and we've got T1 micro and all that. And so we selected a T2 micro from memory, and so we can, or T1 micro, and we can do that. So just scrolling down a bit more, so we've actually got this section called mappings. And so what that can do is it can map what we enter in a parameter to another specific text. So for example, when you select T1 micro, it's going to have a key for architecture. So we have different types, and you don't need to know about this too much, but we have paravirtual and HVM. So they're the two types of AMI. And so depending on what instance you select, depends on decides whether you have paravirtual or HVM. Again, don't be too concerned about it, but there are a couple of types there. And then from there, we've got another set of mappings. And so depending on whether you select US East 1 or whichever region you use, we'll select a different AMI. And also depending on what type of instance it is, whether it's a paravirtual or HVM type, will determine what AMI is selected for that instance. So again, don't be too concerned about PV and HVM. Just know that there are those two different types there. But that's how we actually map the user input to something that CloudFormation can understand and use. So then we've got the most important section and the only compulsory section, which is the resources section. And so here we go. We've got our EC2 instance, and it's going to go through a lot of details around what to do with that instance. And if we scroll down a little bit further, we will find that we've got another resource, which is our web server security group. And again, it's got some rules there for port 80 traffic, to allow port 80 traffic to come in because it's a web server. And it's also got their port 22 if we want to connect in via SSH directly to that Linux operating system. So there's the two resources that we are creating with this stack. Now finally, we've got an output section. So that's outputting something called website URL. And it's got a description there, and it's got a value there, which has got the public DNS name. So if you remember, we use the public DNS name in our browser to view the finished website. So where does this go? This is information that we can present to a user that they may need to have. So if we go to the Outputs tab, we can see there it is. So there is our key, which is website URL, the value and the description, which is exactly what we had in our CloudFormation template. So we had the website URL is the key, we had a description for it, and then we had the value, which was the public DNS name. Plus it had HTTP in front of it as well. So again, if we open that, it will point to what we got before. So that's how AWS CloudFormation works. You define what you want from a user in the parameters section. The user will input that, you grab that and you pass it on to CloudFormation, and you create resources with that. And then if you want any information to be fed back to the user, you can create an output from your CloudFormation stack. So what we need to do now is that we need to clean this all up. So I'm just going to minimize this again. And when you create a CloudFormation stack, it's very important that you don't delete the resources. Delete the stack and it will cleanly delete everything for you. So we go into Actions and we delete that stack. Yes, delete. And after a certain amount of time, that will be finished. And so we can just click on Refresh here until it's done. So that brings us to the end of a reasonably complicated lab, but I hope that you've got a reasonable understanding of CloudFormation and the different sections of a CloudFormation template, because that's well and truly all you would need to know as a cloud practitioner. You don't need to know much about the nuts and bolts of an actual CloudFormation template. But rest assured, if you go on to the associate level of this pathway, then you will certainly be getting very much involved in CloudFormation. I'll see you in the next lab.